daily lineup format. And Joe, how does that at all affect your strategy within the draft? Like, do you like to target platoon bats at all? We talked a little bit from the pitching side, but what about from the hitter side? Do you find yourself maybe towards the end of the draft looking at more platoon bats? If you're going to be diligent, you're going to be like paying attention to your lineup every single day. Whenever they're in their lineup, you could throw them in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're a little bit more valuable in the same vein of like the Kerry Carpenter, who you have on the outline, is a great example for me because in a weekly league, I still love him. I still think that he's going to be a valuable asset in roto leagues, but there will be days where he's not playing. He's not going to play a lot, if at all, against lefties. He'll get the odd day off. And if he does sit against lefties in a daily league, you will have one or two guys on your bench so you can slot in there. So where in a roto league or in a weekly league, you would have to take those periodic zeros. You don't have to at all in a daily league. And I think that makes guys like Carpenter, Jock Peterson, in particular, those two that I really like. And I think that makes them a lot more valuable this season. And every season, those guys are a lot more valuable in daily leagues.
Yeah.
Let's like where the rubber meets the road, though, because this is something I don't get enough exposure to this format to really feel like I've tested it thoroughly myself. But you have how many bench spots typically in a daily head-to-head categories league?
On Yahoo, it's 5, Scott.
Yeah, 5. Not that many.
Yeah.
You're saying you want relievers you can slot in for starters. You're saying you want to be able to take advantage of platoon matchups for hitters. So how do you make use of those very few bench spots to do both of those things?
For me, it's either 4 pitchers and 1 hitter or 3 and 2. If you have those relievers that are just in your lineup every day, you don't have to worry about taking them out. Maybe periodically you will if you have just a ton of starters, but those guys stay in your lineup pretty much every day. So you have 5 or 6 starting pitchers that you can cycle through, and then 1 or 2 guys on the bench. Typically for me, I like to have some multi-position eligibility there, if it's a second base outfield type or a corner infield type. But I do think that the 4 and 1 is usually what I'd like to do. And then hopefully I do have somebody that's reliable. That's like, if I have a Willie Castro, it'd be perfect. Somebody that I can just slot in whenever somebody else has a day off. That's kind of the way I like to do it. But 3 and 2, I think also works very well. If you have a spare outfielder and a spare infielder for those days off, I think that works.
So the platoon bat, like the Jock Peterson type, that's just like one hitter spot you have to play with, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to have a ton of these guys. Don't get me wrong. Okay. You can't have 5 or 6 of them. But if you do have Jock Peterson, heck, you could probably even get away with 2 of them. If you're going to go with 2 guys on the bench, you might have the odd day in a daily lineup where you take a 0 or you have to bench a guy, which is my least favorite thing about daily lineup leagues, is having to bench a position player, which is why I don't like to fill up the bench with them. There's some guys in leagues I play in that have 5 or 6 position players on the bench, depending on the different formats. I like to just have 1 or 2. So also just take away some of those decisions of, am I sitting Jordan Walker today or am I sitting whoever? Because I know the guy that I sit is going to hit a home run. It's just the way it works.
Also worth noting that it is different depending on what your league, not just your lineup policies, but what your transaction policies are. Because some leagues are going to have an ad limit for the week, or some leagues are going to be daily lineups, but weekly transactions, or daily transactions, but it's a fab every day, in which case, if there are no $0 bids, then you have to be really careful about how aggressive you are. So that's the other thing when you're thinking about all these, juggling your lineup approaches, is what are the actual transaction policies for your league, because it's much harder if you only get the one chance every week to make your lineups.
In daily lineup leagues, there absolutely has to be a weekly transaction limit, right? There, like, I don't know what that number is. Is it 3, 4, 5, 6? But if you make it unlimited, then people are just spamming starting pitcher ads all week long, and they're just streaming the best matchups. And I think at some point there has to be a cap. Is there a number that comes to mind? Should there be, 4 or 5? Is that the kind of sweet spot for weekly transaction limits?
I think 5 is the good number to have. You can stream in a couple of pitchers. If you have a hitter get hurt, you can pick somebody up. If somebody is just flailing and you need to replace them, you can. I think fewer than that, then you run the risk of having injured guys that you can't replace, just the nature of the beast. And if you have more than that, like, this has been a point of contention in my home league for a long time. There are players who like to have unlimited transactions. They want to be able to essentially churn their whole roster over every day and try and maximize the output. And I understand that, but for a lot of us, it's just not feasible. You're working full time, you're doing a lot of stuff. You can't be staring at the Yahoo app every single second of the day.
It's just a game design thing, right? Like if you think about, like, there needs to be a downside in every move that you can allow people to make in a game. And the problem with unlimited daily transactions and lineups is 7 of the 10 categories are counting stats. So there is just really no downside to churning your roster that way. I mean, obviously you might lose really valuable players, but generally speaking, that is just a viable, that's the meta in to continue the game analogy. And so you reach a point where you're not actually rewarding roster construction or baseball knowledge or luck even, which are all things that you want to reward at various points in game design. You're just rewarding the person who's most anal retentive about updating their lineup. And that, I suppose, can be one thing that we can look for, but I think it takes the skill out of the game.
Absolutely. Like, there's a guy in my home league, maybe he's listening right now. Will, if you're tuning in, this is directed at you. For the last couple of years, we've had it so there's no waiver wire system. So that 3 a.m. hits on the East Coast, you can pick up whoever you want. And every day for the last 2 years, I got a notification from Will that he's picked up the 2 best streamers for the day. So it also feeds into that point of, like, what do we want to be playing here? Do we want to just be playing a game where the guy who's up at 3 o'clock gets the best players? And guess who won the league last year? Will won the league last year. So we're going to be transitioning into more of a waiver wire system like we had before. But then people would complain that, well, my pitcher got scratched today and I want a last second replacement on a Sunday, but I have to wait 2 days for the waiver wire system. So there is a happy medium somewhere there.
Yeah,
probably just set up weekly transactions to go with your daily lineup. That's probably the happy medium.
Yeah,
but
you can do first come, first serve, but if you have a weekly limit on how many you could do, I think it makes sense to save at least 2 of those for the weekend, just so you know, okay, I'm trailing in a certain category. Let me try to pick up someone that can hit a home run, or, just in case my pitcher gets scratched on Sunday, I could pick up that player and kind of plug them in right away. So that was kind of like the last thing I wanted to ask you about, Joe, is, streaming is such a big thing in this format. How often do you stream pitchers in a daily lineup league, and how much are you paying attention to, let me make sure I save 2 or 3 of my final pickups for Friday, Saturday, or Sunday when I might need more streamers to catch up in a category?
So my standard, like with the 5 pickups, I tend to try and target 2-start pitchers off the wire. Take a look at the article that Scott puts out and take a look at the different 2-start options for the week and try and maximize the value there. But then I do want to save a couple throughout the week. You are going to have a guy get hurt. You're going to have a pitcher get scratched over the course of the weekend that you're going to want to replace. You never really know what's going to happen in those final couple days of the weekend. So I do want to leave at least, at the very minimum, 2 ads open for the weekend, if I can help it. If you get a barrage of injuries, you can only do so much. But I try and have at least 2 of those streaming spots available. And then if there's a nice matchup on Sunday, somebody's facing the White Sox, or you just really need, a home run, you can stream in whoever. I do like to save a couple for the weekend just to try and mitigate that damage.